Hello audience, Mr. Z here. The question of what if the Axis won World War II is probably one of the most pervasive subjects in all of alternate history, but what's perhaps a more reasonable and more realistic question is not what if the Axis won World War II, but what if the Axis didn't lose World War II, and nor the Allies for that matter, a stalemate. Both sides decide that they can't beat each other and agree to settle things. There are countless ways that this could be accomplished just off the top of most people's heads. Don't invade Russia, don't attack Pearl Harbor, don't let Italy join your team. I'm sure some of the more experienced historians in the audience would say something along the lines of King Edward not abdicating or pulling more neutral countries into the conflict like Spain, Sweden, and Mexico. Stretching out the war or putting an anti-war leader in power seems to be the consensus, but I propose an alternative. I propose that through extensive espionage and increased funding for research, both sides discovered the atomic bomb at the same time and much earlier, equally demonstrating the ability to wipe out entire cities, thus forcing a peace agreement out of early fears of mutually assured destruction, which at this point would be more like gradually assured destruction, but still a terrifying and devastating concept for both the Axis and the Allies. We'll assume that in this timeline the bomb is ready for deployment by early 1943, and either the US, Britain, or somehow Russia has it on the ready. Likewise, Germany, Japan, or somehow Italy does as well. I noted these last two jokingly, but even so, Italy and the Soviet Union are far out of range of any significant targets. Britain and Germany, however, are highly capable of striking each other's major population centers, and while I could certainly see Hitler more willing to strike the Soviets than the Brits, it may not leave as significant an impact as striking at the heart of the British Empire. While the range between Germany itself and major Soviet population centers could also prove a challenge, the two most probable targets for the Allies at this point in time would either be Hamburg or Kassel, while the two most probable targets for the Axis would either be London or even as far as Manchester. However, a nuking of London would likely spell a defeat for Britain and would need to be met with a nuking of Berlin. So, we'll say that Britain strikes Hamburg and Germany strikes just outside of London, demonstrating the ability to reach their capital. This would be enough to bring these two to the negotiation table, part of the agreement being a ceasing of the advance on the Eastern Front and an end to the war in the Pacific. Borders are finalized to restore autonomy to northern France and grant Germany reign over Poland, while its client states of Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Finland, and the newly established state of Slavia occupy western regions formerly inhabited by the Soviet Union, who would hold a hefty grudge against the Axis and do everything in its power to steal the secrets of the atomic bomb, while continuing to wage a proxy war against the Japanese through the communists in China, initially facing significant losses, especially after Britain briefly intervened to establish the buffer zone between the conflicts and its holdings in India. As territorial advancements came to a halt, conflicts briefly ceased, only for the Soviets to launch a massive armored assault against the Japanese front, which was eventually annihilated by a massive armed border wall set up by the Japanese. It would be at this wall that borders would finally be resolved, but tensions remained high, and it was clear that war was far from over. First major order of business for Europe would be the reconstruction of battle-torn areas, something the US may see as an opportunity to implement an earlier form of the Marshall Plan. However, given that conflicts end earlier, the damage may not be as substantial, and the most likely nations, if any, to accept this plan would probably be France and Italy, who itself would hope to establish closer ties with the US and maintain a regular trade partnership. However, these advances would be shot down by FDR, who would want no alliance with a fascist state. However, over in the Americas, ties were growing between a foreign and domestic power. As it would turn out, the Soviet Union had been facilitating and funding the shipment of weapons, plans, and propaganda to Mexico in hopes of sparking a communist uprising. This would siphon efforts from the backing of Fidel Castro later on in the Cuban Revolution. However, this would need to be an acceptable loss, as Mexico was in a more strategic position to allow Soviet spies to enter the US and steal nuclear secrets. This movement would begin slowly and secretly gaining traction against the divided Trotskyists, socialists, and other far-left factions, unifying them into a single force sympathetic to the Soviets and operating outside of the government's supervision. Rumors would begin to circulate around the US of potential communist activity south of the border, and for the time being, FDR chooses to ignore it, and the issue would remain largely ignored until the mid-Truman presidency, when the president would finally be caught up to speed as to the extent of the growing Soviet influence in Mexico. Not wanting to cause a scare in the public, but wanting to promote alertness, funding would go into greater anti-communist propaganda in the southwestern states, while border security is heightened and propositions are put forth with and without the Mexican government as to how the communist problem should be addressed. Returning to Europe, things are beginning to look up for France and Britain as foreign aid plans are scrapped, and the two resolve to establish the Franco-British Union in order to unite their economies and strengthen their presence on the European playing field. But at the same time, Britain and Japan may be in some trouble, as the Soviets demonstrate growing aggressions by pulling a portion of India and territory held by Japan under Soviet swing, becoming a haven for socialist sympathizers and pro-independence activists within India. But this clearly wouldn't be enough, as the new socialist state of India would demonstrate clear ambitions to reclaim its former land occupied by the British, and to top it all off, it would appear that Slavia is coming under severe threat of invasion by the Soviets. Having agitated nearly all of the world's major powers, it would seem that everyone was preparing to retaliate against the Soviets, but before they even got the chance, the Soviets would launch their first successful nuclear test. Thank you all for watching, be sure to tune in next time, like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more. Mr. Z, out.